Good evening, and we begin tonight with the IRA bomb that brought death and chaos to the West End of London. Today, whilst they've been searching for the third device, the friends and colleagues of the bomb disposal man who died have been paying their tributes to and comforting the family of Kenneth Howarth from Bracknell. Here's Steve Clark.
Mid-afternoon in Oxford Street, and 49-year-old Ken Howarth checks his gear at the back of a police Land Rover, ready to perform the task in which he's an acknowledged expert, bomb disposal. Just a few hours earlier, he'd left his home at Bracknell in Berkshire with no idea what the day would bring and the job he'd been doing for most of his working life. As he got ready to go into the basement of the Wimpy Bar, he even joked. Oh well, he said, another day, another job. But seconds later, another job went horribly wrong. Ken Howarth was right by the bomb as it exploded. Its force blew a hole in the floor of the pavement and the cafe, shattering the building. Ken Howarth never had a chance. At home in Bracknell, Ken was known as a family man who, in the words of one neighbour, accepted the dangers of his job without treating them dramatically. In the evenings, he was a familiar sight around the area in which he lived, walking the family dog before returning home to the three people who are now missing him most: his wife Anne, son Steve, and teenage daughter Susan. Today, they've stayed inside the family home in this quiet cul-de-sac, guarded by a single policeman. In a statement issued through local police, Mrs. Howarth said that she would be prepared to speak to the news media in due course, but not for at least a couple of days. But at lunchtime, there was one official visitor for the family. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir David McNee arrived for an unannounced visit and spent some 20 minutes inside the house talking to them. Afterwards, he said he'd come to convey his sympathy and the sympathy of his colleagues to the family. He spoke of Mrs. Howarth obviously showing signs of stress, but also displaying a lot of her husband's courage. Then he had a tribute for Ken Howarth. He was, he said, a courageous professional. He'd been in the business a long time, and sadly he'd lost his life doing the job he wanted to do.
And still to come in tonight's programme, the social services are under attack as a council leader says they can't cope and they're being unfair. We investigate. We also investigate the claim that this kind of horsepower could be more efficient than any other. Is it back to the land for them? We're joined by the versifying Pam Ayres, who has a poem for us, and we join a woman village bobby as she takes up her duties. All that later, but first let's catch up with the regional news, and here with the regional news is David Boban.
A man from Farnham in Surrey who hatched a plot to get his brother out of Winchester jail has received a 2-year prison sentence. 40-year-old Colin Watkins admitted helping his brother Leonard to escape, and there'll be more details in News Extra. The man who caused last summer's fire, which swept through the Old Town Mill buildings at Gillingham in Dorset, was jailed for 4 years today. The Old Town Mills, regarded as a beautiful centrepiece to Gillingham, was so badly damaged that they're said to be beyond repair. At Dorchester Crown Court, 32-year-old Philip Robinson from 10 acres at Shaftesbury admitted starting the fire. He said he'd been drinking following the break-up of his marriage, and he was now desperately sorry. Robinson also admitted starting 2 other fires, one in a barn and the other in a garden shed. A new row has broken out in the docks of Southampton that could close the port for good. Roger Livingston reports.
Docker shop steward Richie Pearce said this morning that the men were so furious over a breach of their agreement that they would fight it all the way, even if it meant the closure of the port. At a mass meeting this morning, 1,500 dockers were told that management had broken their agreement on pay comparability, and the dockers were falling behind in the pay league. The cargo checkers in particular would soon have an earnings potential far greater than the dockers, they were told. Docks management said that that was not an accurate picture of their agreement, but declined to discuss it in detail. Disputes have beset the docks for 8 months now. Millions of pounds of revenue have been lost because of short-time working during that time. A major part of the container berth has been closed down entirely for the last 4 weeks. The current dispute, which remains unsettled, involves the checkers. A second meeting with ACAS has been fixed for next week. But today, the dockers leader, Richie Pearce, warned that unless pay comparability became more favourable, they would take industrial action for however long it took to get what they want.
A man of 35 has appeared before magistrates on the Isle of Wight accused of attempting to murder his wife last Friday. Brian Choate of Horseshoe Close at Northwood was remanded in custody for a week. A woman died and 2 people were injured when a car crashed into a roadside fence on a country road near Fleet. 6 timber posts went through the car, impaling and killing one of the passengers. She was 18-year-old Rosalind Howell of Blackwater in Hampshire. A woman had an amazing escape when she fell in front of a train at Reading today. The train, which was slowing down, knocked her into the space between the lines, and it ran right over her without causing her any further injury. The woman is now recovering from her ordeal in the Royal Berkshire Hospital at Reading. Fire caused considerable damage to the interior of the former Boots department store in Weston Road at Brighton today. The road, one of Brighton's main shopping streets, had to be closed while firemen with 6 appliances tackled the outbreak. The store was empty at the time because it's being converted into a hamburger bar. 2 brothers are so upset about being flooded out that they're moving their house, brick by brick, into their back garden. The house is at Findon on the A20 London to Worthing Road. Whenever there's a cloudburst, water pours off the road into the garden, and as a result, the owners, Eric and Ron Maslin, have had to move out 4 times in the last year. Now the brothers, who are both builders, plan to move it onto higher ground at the back. The police have now completed their investigations into alleged irregularities at Gosport Town Hall in Hampshire. They were called in during the summer following the suspension of a council official. A report is now in the hands of a senior police officer who'll decide whether to prosecute. City Council officials of Portsmouth have denied that they're being heartless over the case of a disabled man who's being evicted from his home. They claim that the man, who's had 3 strokes since Christmas, has brought his troubles on himself. Peter Clark explains.
51-year-old Joseph Kelly says that the strokes he's suffered over the past 10 months have left him disabled and feeling ill. And he has great difficulty climbing 4 flights of stairs to get to his council flat in Cumberland Street at Portsmouth. It's a big flat with 4 bedrooms, and he asked the council to give it to a family with children and move him to a smaller place. But he says his requests were turned down, even though he was supported by letters from doctors. So, in what he now admits was a foolish protest, he decided to withhold his rent to put pressure on the council. They then obtained a court order to evict him, and they're going ahead with this tomorrow, even though he's now offered to pay them all the rent arrears. Mr. Kelly says he's terrified of being left on the street, and he believes the worry could bring on another stroke. Today, a Portsmouth Council spokesman said they were evicting Mr. Kelly because he'd staged rent strikes on several occasions in the past, and they'd no guarantee that he'd not do the same in the future. The council also said they'd no plans to offer him any alternative accommodation.
Now football, and Brighton's new signing from Arsenal, Sammy Nelson, may make his club debut tonight. He's in the squad for the League Cup second leg tie with Huddersfield at the Golston Ground. Brighton lost the first leg 1-0. And Portsmouth have recalled Alex Cropley for the home game against Queen's Park Rangers. Their striker Jeff Hemmerman is also back after recovering from injury. 8 young actors and actresses took a trip on the Watercress line in Hampshire today as preparation for a new musical at the Haymarket Theatre in Basingstoke. The youngsters, who are aged between 9 and 14, are all appearing in The Railway Children. It's already been a film and a television series, but this is the first time it's been performed on stage. It's due to run for 3 weeks at Basingstoke, starting on December the 1st. A man hijacked a taxi in Bournemouth during the night. After hailing the taxi in Westover Road, he threatened the driver with a knife and ordered him to hand over the vehicle. The taxi was later found abandoned. And finally in the news tonight, 2 Labour councillors at Salisbury, including a former city mayor, have joined the Social Democrats. They say that they're unhappy with the party's swing to the left. That's all the news for the moment. More tonight in Southern News Extra at 10:28.
The leader of the Labour group on the Hampshire County Council is calling for a full investigation into the way in which the county's social services are run. He accuses them of being high-handed, overstretched and incapable of handling many of the very sensitive cases with which they have to deal. And he quotes special cases. Here's Preston Witz.
The allegations are being made by Councillor Michael Hancock, who leads the opposition Labour group on Hampshire County Council. He says that in case 1, the parents of an 18-year-old girl with a mental age of 8 tried for 6 months to get the social services to help them cope. Eventually the parents involved the police. The girl ended up in court and was remanded at Holloway Prison. There was no social worker in court at the time. Now the girl is in care. In case 2, a 12-year-old girl was taken into care. Her parents fought to get her back. The girl ran away from her foster parents and is now back in the care of the social services. In case 3, a 13-year-old boy was taken into care. For no apparent reason, he was put in a secure unit for nearly a year. Later, a High Court judge criticised the social services for being wrong. In case 4, the parents of a severely epileptic boy aged 14 cannot get any help at all from the social services. These are the allegations being made by Councillor Hancock. With me in the studio now is Councillor Hancock, and joining him are Hampshire social worker and Nalgo branch official Sue Trowell and Councillor John Darling, the chairman of Hampshire Social Services Committee. Councillor Hancock, first of all, exactly what are you saying about the way in which the social services are run?
I'm saying that those 4 cases and many others are clear indications to me and to my colleagues that there's something radically wrong with the Social Services Department at the present time. Now, there can be connivance and complacency from chief officers and from leading councillors about the situation, and they can make excuses about the government cutbacks and lack of staff to carry it out. But people are suffering, people's well-being is put in jeopardy, and children in care, in my opinion, are not being catered for properly, and parents who want their children back out of care are experiencing grave difficulties in doing it. Those 4 cases and many others are classic examples of where the bureaucratic system is going wrong and where Hampshire social services can no longer come up to scratch and to meet the demands that are being made on it ever increasingly because of the economic situation we're all living in.
Well, Councillor Darling, you're the chairman of the committee. What's your response broadly to that?
Well, I would say Councillor Hancock is not a member of Social Services Committee. I think if he was, he would be more in contact with what we're doing every day. He is frequently attacking social services, which he does usually in the media. It would be better, I think, if he made a direct contribution in Social Services Committee. I think it would be quite improper for me to comment on particular cases because these are usually very complicated. They involve children, parents, social workers, police, the courts. They are extremely complicated, but everything is gone into very carefully, and if we're not satisfied at what has happened, then everything is very thoroughly investigated.
But as I understand it, Councillor Hancock says that he does raise these matters with you in committee and with the various officials.
Well, he's not on Social Services Committee. He raises them only at the main county council meeting, which occurs about every 2 months. But the Social Services Committee is directly responsible for social services. The particular cases of particular personal difficulty, are dealt with by our special subcommittee, which of course meets in private because many of these things would be very distressing to the people involved were they to become public.
Sue Trowell, you're actually a social worker. What's your reaction to what's been said so far?
Yes, that's true. I am a social worker, but I'm also a Hampshire County Council Nalgo branch officer, and I am very worried about the effect of such allegations on social workers, many of whom are Nalgo members.
Do you think there's any substance at all to any of these allegations?
It is very difficult to say without having much more detail about cases, and obviously Nalgo don't become involved in individual cases. What we are concerned about are staffing levels and whether our staff are able, whether our members are able to fulfil their function.
Do you think that at the present time, given the current circumstances, they are able to fulfil those functions?
I think for many years there have been staffing shortages in Hampshire, and Nalgo has constantly approached management and expressed concern, been quite vigorous at times about this matter. I think this, as I've already said, has been a problem for many years. I don't think it's any better at the moment. I think we're suffering the effects of long-term expenditure cuts.
What's been the response, though, of the local authority and the authorities nationally when you've made your representations? How have they responded? I mean, have they actually done anything to satisfy your demands?
In certain areas, but of course never sufficient. And given the current climate where there is an enormous amount of unemployment and increasing unemployment, it would be very difficult to meet the demands being placed upon the Social Services Department at the moment.
See, that's simply not the whole story. Social services had the stuffing knocked out of it by a reorganisation which was forced on them by, for political reasons, by the majority party. Now, that reorganisation absolutely decimated the morale of the services. Senior social workers were writing to members of the county council expressing real concern about their thoughts for the future of the services. Now, we've seen now the reality of what they were saying. The service is bad, has suffered, the morale has been affected, and there are real difficulties because of cutbacks. People are suffering, people's well-being is put at risk because of cuts that have been made, and because of the denial, in my opinion, of the correct responsibility being directed by elected members. Councillor Darling says that I raised the points. We have very few debates in the County Council about social services. From now on, I'm determined to bring this out once and for all into the open so that we can have the sort of debate. Social services itself do not look for debate upon their responsibility. Social workers are having a dickens of a difficult job at the present time, and the county council elected members are just completely ignorant of what's going on, and that simply isn't good enough.
Yes or no, Councillor Darling, will there be a full examination of this?
Well, I think Councillor Hancock should join Social Services Committee, and he would be better informed. We are always trying to improve the service. We are always looking at cases where we think where we fall down, and in such a large service, of course, there are bound to be occasional incidents which are less satisfactory than others. But we are expanding domiciliary services. In no way we're a static service. We are improving the service all the time.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid we must end there. Obviously the debate will go on. Thank you.
In Sussex, there's a thriving industrial community where over 100 people have found new employment. But until quite recently, what's been going on there has been kept quiet, at least from official ears, and for the good reason that they could close it down, as Derek Williamson now explains.
This is Oakendene Manor Farm near Horsham, but it's a farm like no other in the area. When the district council heard what was going on here, they were, quote, astounded and astonished, and not a little embarrassed too, because what has been going on here has been going on in secret, or at least without the council's knowledge, for 18 months. Oakendene Manor Farm is now a thriving industrial estate, with more than 30 firms employing over 100 people in sheds and outbuildings that used to house an intensive calf rearing unit. But it's all taken place without official planning permission. The owner of Oakendene is Michael Burrows. Mr. Burrows, why didn't you apply for formal planning permission when you started developing your farm buildings into an industrial estate?
Basically because we had already got people in occupation of the units. We had possibly, I suppose, about a third let before we realized all the implications, and so we decided that we would carry on.
Isn't it also fair to say that you knew that if you applied for planning permission beforehand, you knew it'd be refused?
No, we knew that the government had taken a very different picture from what most people realize, and in fact the government were encouraging disused agricultural buildings to be used for light industry. This we'd gathered because there is an estate not very far from here which are employing 270 people, about 8 miles.
The estate consists of small, so-called feeder units, workshops with an average area of just 700 square feet. And they contain a wide cross-section of embryo businesses, a husband and wife team who make candles. He's an industrial chemist who was made redundant, a motor repair yard, furniture restorers and furniture importers, a tool-making company which outgrew the garage in Horsham where it started, a sheet metal company making ducts for heating and ventilation, and a firm manufacturing equipment for the oil industry, and that means 50 or 60% exported as well as for the North Sea.
For somebody who's been made redundant, he's got a little bit of cash, he's got no track record at all, but he's got his skill. And all he wants is to establish himself in a place like this, which is really nursery units. From here, they will then grade themselves up and they will be able to afford units of 2,000, 5,000 square feet. But without the nursery units, they haven't got a hope in hell.
What do you think will happen if the council serves an enforcement notice on you and this place had to close down and reopen again as a farm?
Well, it wouldn't reopen as a farm. There's no way that we could do that because the buildings were originally designed for intensive livestock rearing, and it would be uneconomical to turn them back again into any form of farming. This we checked out very, very carefully. They weren't the normal range of farm buildings. They were built for intensive calf production.
Horsham Council now face an embarrassing dilemma. On the one hand, there's the employment of 100 people to consider, as well as a stated government policy encouraging councils to free suitable agricultural land for small-scale industry. On the other, there's the knowledge that if they allow planning permission now, they might be seen to be giving carte blanche for the wide-scale industrialisation of the countryside. Official red faces aside, no one at Horsham Council wanted to be interviewed about the industrial estate they didn't find out about for more than a year. Even the councillor who first brought the matter into the open said he'd rather wait for a report being prepared by officers into the scale of operations here. But when the councillors do eventually get around to making a decision about Oakendene Manor, it's likely that the planning department will advise them to enforce the rules and close this place down.
Derek Williamson reporting from Horsham. After the break, we'll be reporting on the college, where they're keeping very much alive some of the old crafts and skills. That comes in part 2.
Yes, in a short while, the light fluffy sponge rose through the delicious sauce. And McDougall's saucy sponge, always a happy ending.
Were you actually guessing, or could you really tell the difference?
No, I could tell the difference.
Yeah?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah?
The start tasted much better than mine.
Come on, let's open the wine.
I forgot the wine.
Oh, Guinevere. Green label. Just the one.
Light, crisp, perfectly blended, Deinhardt Green Label is just the one.
Just the one.
I enjoy a bit of sophistication, so I was very pleased to discover KP Skips. Delicate corn fries in pretty flower shapes with a subtle oriental flavour. Dainty, aren't they? So light, so refined. Some people like them best when they're relaxing. When you feel like something dainty, have a skip.
Sunbeam introduces the do-anything snack machine. It'll do toasted cheese, ham and pineapple, Cornish pasty, apple pie, scones.
Pizza pie, please.
Whatever takes your fancy, you'll get a delicious hot snack with a Sunbeam sandwich toaster. The edges are sealed so the filling won't spill out. And the dishes are extra deep, so you can put in more filling. For the bigger family, there's our 4 at a time model. Sunbeam sandwich toasters. Sunbeam, make it better.
Good old curry powder, Britain's favourite. You won't find much in a curry from India. She uses individual blends of herbs and spices to make her authentic curry sauces. Mild korma from Kashmir, spicy Rogan Josh, hot Madras. So we followed her recipes to create 5 classic curry sauces. More pucker than powder.
From Home Pride, of course.
With the rising cost of fuel, it's hardly surprising that all sorts of alternatives are being examined or re-examined, and among them horsepower. The Shire Horse Society commissioned an economist to look into comparative costs, and it was concluded that a pair of horses can be as economic as a 4-ton lorry. Annual cost of operating both is about £11,000. The running cost per mile is 99 pence for horses and lorries. But horses, of course, are much quieter, more aesthetically pleasing, and they have a useful waste product of £20 a year worth of dung. And now a university study is to look into the possibility of bringing the horses back to the land. In our Dover studio is David McInerney from Chiddingly near Eastbourne, who breeds and sells Shire horses. How many of them are at work now?
On my farm, I've got 6 at the moment.
Do you have any of them to the plough? That's surely one of the most inefficient ways of using horses, isn't it?
Well, it's inefficient in the sense that the amount that you get done per hour, but you can at least do it when the conditions of the ground is not good for a tractor.
But how much can a pair of horses plough?
An acre a day is the recognised amount.
But a tractor will do, what, 10, 12 times that, won't it?
Yeah, yes, depending on how many furrow plough you use with a tractor.
What then can horses really do? Where is it they can be most effective?
I would think they'd be most effective on a fair-sized farm where they're using tractors to feed livestock. I think horses could be utilised for that. Anywhere where the actual travelling distance is short.
So you use them rather like a hitch cart or something of that kind, where you can fasten onto any anything that a tractor normally pulls.
Yes, a roller, fertiliser drill, anything like that, instead of converting everything back to shafts.
How much does a horse actually cost, a shower horse?
Well, the young horses that I sell are usually from about 1,000 to 1,500, depending if they're wanted for work or work and show. Show horses obviously are dearer for the simple reason of sort of good conformation.
On the working side, how long is their working life?
If the horse is sound, anything from up to 20 years, I mean, till he's 20 or 25, providing he stays sound.
So it's not a bad proposition if you put a two-horse wagon on the road for sort of £4,500, because a 4-ton lorry would cost you, almost twice that.
Exactly.
But you do have the problem, of course, of looking after them.
That I think is the biggest problem. Finding people who understand them and don't mind using them working on the weekends as well, because they have to be fed 7 days a week.
Do you find that there's much demand for them? Are people actually buying them off you?
Yes, I'm very pleased.
Who have you sold any to lately, then?
I've sold a pair just recently in the last month to Young's Brewery up in London. Tomorrow I've got one of the borough councils from London coming down to look at one. I've sold several abroad to Holland and quite a lot into Wales, which I'm surprised.
So you're doing fairly well. Can you see the comeback of the horses on farms?
Yes, slowly. I think they'll come back first and foremost with the sheer interest people are showing into them. Then I think the sort of facts and figure men get hold of it, and I hope that will sort of encourage it really seriously.
But the facts and figures men are the ones who are getting hold of it now on the encouragement of your association, your society.
Yes, quite right.
Will there be enough of these shower horses actually to meet this demand, if a demand in fact is created? Because that's another point altogether, isn't it?
Yes, there's one little point I would like to mention on that, that at the moment I think there's a lot being bred, and in the future I'd like to see people studying carefully the type of horses they're using for breeding, and not just breeding shires just for the simple reason it's a shire, to get sort of quality into these horses.
Well, Mr. McInerney, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for talking to us about shire horses. I love them. As a boy, I used to go to school on a milk cart pulled by a horse. There are many people on the Isle of Wight who remember that. It will take a lot of people's memories back, I can tell you. So too does the kind of crafts and skills that they teach at Westdean College near Chichester. This week, that college is celebrating its 10th birthday. It's independent of the state system, provides courses that are not available elsewhere, and it's a success, as Steve Harris now tells us.
10 years ago, the industrialist Edward James donated this magnificent Victorian pile and its 6,000-acre estate to an educational foundation dedicated to saving and maintaining some of the skills and crafts that might otherwise have been lost to us. In the 10 years since that modest beginning, Westdean has grown into an educational institution which is unique anywhere in the Western world, offering last year 350 courses in 100 different crafts. And what's more, it's all self-financing. Indeed, such is the growth in its worldwide reputation that a significant number of students and also some of the teachers now come from abroad. In the college's main workshop, we spoke to the principal, Peter Sargenson, about this success.
Edward James, when he decided to set up this very magnificent trust, was to concentrate on crafts that were in danger of dying out through lack of interest or fashion or whatever. And we have tried to get together a whole range of tutors and craftsmen to act, to pass on their skills and their interest in the way that they have done. And we now, 10 years later, have had something like 35,000 students here in a residential way, either for a weekend or a fortnight or 5 days, which is the normal length of time.
The college offers two main and distinct strands of teaching, and it's the part-time courses like this one in picture framing which attracts the most people. and more importantly from the foundation's point of view, the most income. For a relatively modest fee, the students receive tuition in a vast and diverse range of subjects, from cello repair and cane seating to glass blowing, blacksmithing and engraving, not to mention the more conventional extramural classes like painting, pottery and patchwork quilting. But what has done more to gain the college its enviable status and reputation is the long-term residential courses, offering tuition in areas not covered by any other institution. This is the ceramic restoration workshop, and it's the most recent of the courses offered at West Dean. It's currently in its second year, and for an annual fee of £3,000, it offers these craft workers the opportunity to train for full-time work in the antiques trade, in museums and art galleries. Already the reputation of this school is such that it already has an impressive list of clients, like Goodwood House, Petworth and a number of London museums. Then there's clock repairing, a school which has not only revived an ailing craft, but also restored a host of ailing clocks. The area which has attracted most public attention is probably this, the tapestry studio, which is the only one of its kind anywhere in this country. Their most significant achievement so far has been a series of tapestries by Henry Moore, the 13th of which has just been completed and is on display in the main workshop area. And incidentally, that was the tapestry we could see when we were talking to the principal of the college. The biggest task in hand at the moment is this tapestry of William Blake's watercolour, The Ancient of the Days. It's being commissioned by Edward James, the original benefactor of the college. In many ways, what we're seeing here is the creation of a masterpiece, which in the future will be as valuable as the 16th century tapestries which hang in the main house at West Dean. But unlike most other educational institutions of its kind, the college must live or die on the quality of its work. But with achievements like this and an already established reputation, the next 10 years could see it going from strength to strength.
Happy birthday to them. Some alarming facts about learner drivers have been emerging today at the National Road Safety Congress. It's been claimed that one driving test in every 9 would end in a crash were it not for examiners taking some kind of emergency action. The Department of Transport is said to be very concerned about its examiners being put under such mental stress. Well, one driver who'll never give anyone a nervous breakdown is Sharon Harris from Tisbury in Wiltshire. Sharon isn't allowed on the roads yet. She's still only 15, but she's just been named the best young girl driver in Britain. She won the title on the Donington Park racing circuit in Derbyshire. The tests included weaving in and out of bollards at speed, reversing also at speed into spaces only a few inches wider than the car. Sharon first got behind the steering wheel at the age of 7 when her father, Mr. Paul Harris, let her drive his pickup truck around a field. He says she's never shown any interest in ponies, only motor cars. She's a member of Warminster Autograss Club, although she'll have to wait another 2 years before she's old enough to have a competition licence. You'll have to wait another couple of minutes for part 3, day by day.
Teeth need more than fluoride protection because a major cause of tooth decay is plaque. So you need a toothpaste like McLean's that actively fights plaque as well as giving fluoride protection. McLean's unique calcium formulation fights plaque 3 ways. It slows down the buildup of plaque, it helps neutralize the harmful acid in plaque, and McLean's fights plaque like this all day. McLean's not only gives you fluoride protection, unbeatable fluoride protection, it actually fights a major cause of decay, plaque. McLean's fights plaque. Did you McLean your teeth today?
Twining's teas can magic you away to secret pagodas and much further. Or is it just a rumor?
Coca-Cola? A Coke and a sun makes me feel good, makes me feel nice. That's the way it should be, and I'd like to see
If we told you that a certain oil company wanted to push a pipeline through this lovely Welsh valley, a pipeline which would stretch for 78 miles across the countryside, which would cut a swathe 30 yards wide, which would mean digging 7 feet down into the earth, sending bulldozers into the Snowdonia National Park, you would probably, quite rightly, be very alarmed. You might, with good reason, form a protest committee, ask for a special inquiry, write in the strongest terms to your MP. You needn't worry. This is the valley after, not before, Shell laid its pipeline. Work began only after Shell had consulted the local people. And when work finished, we restored the valley, as you can see, to its natural beauty. Can we develop the industry we need without destroying our countryside? You can be sure of Shell.
Warm them. A sorcerer can do it. Please them. A sorcerer can do it.
Welcome back, and to come, the village Bobby on the beat. We join her as she takes up her duties. And we are joined by Pam Ayres with a ballad of Bill Spink's Bedstead. That is after we catch up with News Extra with David Boban.
Friends and colleagues of the bomb disposal man from Bracknell who died in yesterday's bomb attack in London have been paying their tributes. Men who worked with Ken Howarth described him as a courageous professional. He leaves a widow and 2 children. Police have arrested a young woman who sprayed paint over the car taking Prince Charles and Princess Diana through the town of Carnarvon on their official visit to Wales. A man from Farnham in Surrey who helped his brother attempt to escape from Winchester jail has received a 2-year prison sentence. 40-year-old Colin Watkins admitted trying to get his brother Leonard out of the jail. An accomplice was sentenced to a year in prison after being found guilty of taking part in the plot. Leonard's sister-in-law Samantha was also found guilty but was released on probation. Leonard Watkins is serving a life sentence for murdering a customs official. At Southampton, the Dockers leader, Richie Pearce, has threatened industrial action in a row over pay comparability, and he says the Dockers will fight management all the way, even if it means the port has to close down for good. The Independent Broadcasting Authority have warned that they'll have to put off plans for local radio in East Kent if they're not allowed a mast at Wickham Brew near Canterbury. Local people have objected to the plans because they say that a 270-foot mast would be an eyesore, but the authority have rejected the allegation. They say the mast will be only 18 inches wide. And finally tonight in the headlines, the new cross-channel ferry service between Ramsgate and Dieppe have announced losses of more than £600,000 in the first 4 months of their operation.
Thank you, David. The debate about the style of policing our towns and cities goes on. Should it be community policing, back to the beat, and your friendly village cop? They're getting an increasing number of the latter around the country these days. They've just got a new one at Goudhurst in Kent, and Arnie Wilson has been along there to meet her.
This is Operation Julie, country style. This particular Julie is not part of an undercover drug squad, but she does have a difficult enough task. At the tender age of 21, she's recently become one of Kent's elite group of women village constables. This is Goudhurst, a sleepy picture postcard village in the Weald. It's farming country, and for outlying farms, Julie is an important contact. In return, farmers often notice things, and they can help the police by being observant. There's not a lot of crime around here. A few cars broken into, the odd burglary, or perhaps a haul of Kent peg tiles from someone's roof. Julie's role is more what a village bobby's job is traditionally meant to be. A sort of parish councillor, schoolmistress, watchman and marriage guidance counsellor rolled into one. It's all about the personal touch. Julie, what made you choose this job in the first place, or didn't you have a choice?
Obviously I had a choice. It was just something I've always wanted to do from when I was about 14. I was interested, and then I applied for the cadets and luckily got in, so I started in the cadets.
Did you come to a village like Goudhurst for a quiet life, or do things actually happen here from time to time?
Things do happen. For instance, 2 years ago, there was the murder at Bedgebury, which still hasn't been solved, so things do happen.
What are the nicest parts of the job for you?
Meeting people, especially in a village like this. Most of the people I've met obviously are very friendly and cooperative. You can find out a lot of things from just talking to people in the village. and they're very friendly.
Do they treat you as a woman or as a policewoman or
As a
both?
police officer, I think, yes. Obviously, there's still a lot of people to get to know. I've only been here 2 months, and that is my aim, to get to know more people and to know more places.
Sometimes she gets a bit of moral support from Sergeant David Doughty, her regional boss from Cranbrook. Together, they visit one of the locals, not for a drink, but to make a routine call to the landlord, David Fusedale. Every pub has to be checked like this every 3 months.
Good
afternoon.
Hello, Julie.
Yeah, it's just a routine visit. This is Sergeant Doughty, Mr. Fusedale.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Any problems?
No, not really, no. It's all right. Get 1 or 2 occasional 1 or 2 cars in the road, that's all sometimes, but no problems really at all.
I've spoken to a few people about that, actually, and they shouldn't have any more problems with it.
What do you think about the idea of having a woman village constable?
I find it very useful. For example, about a year ago, someone was pursuing my daughter in a car, and I found that she was less nervous having to speak to a woman than to perhaps a man.
Honestly, I think it's a really good idea. Obviously, we've seen her travelling around the roads here, and she's quite confident. Yeah, matter of fact, apart from that, she's a very, very likeable person.
Can I ask you, what do you think about the idea of having a woman village constable?
Well, I reckon she's lovely. Yourself?
Do you reckon she's good at her job?
Of course she's good at her job.
There's a great recommendation for you. Now, she was discovered, if that's the right word, by Radio Oxford. She was revealed for all to see on the Parkinson Show. She had a television series of her own. She travelled the world trotting out her work. She's that rare phenomenon, someone who turned an amateur talent to amuse into a professional success. Today, she's in the South, has a new book out. Pam Ayres.
I found a dead rat in our woodshed. I found it at 7:45. I tried to give it the kiss of life, but I'd left it 10 minutes too late. Thank you.
A little offering there from Pam
Ayres.
I sort of shudder to ask, what is the most unusual, offbeat subject you've ever written about? Because they're all pretty weird, aren't they, really?
Well, yes, it's difficult to say because I've got about 100 published and they're all about varied subjects. I suppose one of my favourites is the one about a warlike limpet, because limpets are not by nature very warlike.
And big feet as well is another one, isn't it?
Yes, I did write one about having big feet and the fact that shoe shops don't cater for people with big feet as a rule. That was the voice of protest. Because I've often walked humiliated out of shoe shops because they've got nothing. They've got lots of nice shoes, but nothing to fit me feet.
Right. Well, there are lots more offerings in your new book, which is called The Ballad of Bill Spink's Bedstead and Other Poems. Now, who or what is Bill Spinks, and what about this bedstead of his?
Well, Bill Spinks is a youth. He's a spotty youth, pale, white, thin youth. And the trouble is he can't get a girlfriend. So what he does, he cashes his national savings certificates and goes out and buys himself a wonderful bed. Oh, this bed with a like you see in London shops with a great big headboard and a thing that makes a cup of tea and shows a picture of your mother and a telly and a quadrasonic sound system. And by these means he meets the woman of his dreams, who is called Grippo Millet.
Grippo Millet.
Oh,
How
yes.
on earth do you think these wonderful names up, Pam? I mean, how does it happen in that incredible imagination of yours?
Well, I just thought the most unattractive name I could think of, and Grippo Millet was about the top of the list.
Do you get people offering you verse of their own? Do you get people writing in and saying, why don't you do this one?
Yes, I get lots of poetry sent to me. It comes in 3 categories, really. Lots of children send me their poems, which is always nice.
Yes.
And I write back and say, well done, keep up the good work. And then I get lots of poems from people who say, will you criticise this work? Which I don't do because I have not got the educational background to sit in judgment on people and say, that's wrong, do it again. And then I get poems from people who write and say, you can use this, but send the money first.
Charming.
So those are sort of the categories it falls into, but I always use my own, so...
There aren't many people bursting into verse, let alone into print. Why is that? I mean, how tough was it, how hard was it for you to get started?
It's very difficult. I mean, publishers, as a rule, don't want to know. If it rhymes, they don't want to know as a rule. And this is because poetry, generally speaking, has got a reputation of being a very poor seller. because I couldn't get anyone to publish mine. I mean, even my breathtaking works, I had to publish myself.
Breathtaking
I
works.
borrowed £60 and published them myself.
Yes, and I wonder actually how much of a package it is, Pam. How much also is it to do with you, your accent, the way you deliver it?
Me razor-sharp wit. Well, I think, yes, I mean, I think when you look at my poems in the book, they look pretty flat and boring. But I do think that if I'm given the opportunity to perform them and fling myself around the stage and wave my arms about, they do tend to come to life.
Right. That
Yes.
sounds like a cue for you to fling yourself around.
All right.
And bring another one to life.
Oh, yes, right. What was I going to do?
I don't know.
I've forgotten. No, oh, it was the plug-hole serenade.
What?
It was the plug-hole serenade.
I almost wish I hadn't asked. Go on
No,
then.
I forgot. I had a mental block there. It's the plug-hole serenade, which is about going sailing in a tin bath. Would you care to come sailing with me, dear? For the wind could not puff out a candle. We'll drag the tin bath up the old garden path and you have the end with the handle. Thank you. What do you think?
That and more in Pam Ayres, The Ballad of Bill Spink's Bedstead for £1.75, and she'll be appearing in a one-man show tomorrow night at the Assembly Hall in Worthing. Later she'll be versifying at Salisbury, Canterbury, Gravesend, Folkestone and other places south. Now, Terence Carroll, Among the Souvenirs.
There are people who, for some reason, need to prove that they've been on holiday. They come back from Mallorca wearing funny straw hats and suntans, or if they've been on holiday in England, they cover their car windows in stickers proclaiming that they've been to Brighton or Bognor or Bournemouth. That's today. But even yesterday, and by yesterday I mean the turn of the century, people brought back proof of where they'd been, usually in the form of small china ornaments bearing the name of the place that they've been to. Ornaments like these.
They were made and sold in hundreds of thousands. As the railway companies opened up the seaside to more and more people, so the china manufacturers mass-produced the cheap and cheerful souvenirs, which were as much a part of a holiday as buckets and spades, sandcastles, and sticks of rock. Selling agents for the ornaments established strict territorial boundaries. A souvenir bearing the crest of a particular town was only available in that town. You couldn't buy a souvenir of Southsea if you happened to be in Maidstone. The trinkets were called Crested china, and trade was so brisk and competitive that the major makers even took whole front-page advertisements in the national newspapers. Crested china was big business until the boom was interrupted in 1914 by an even bigger boom, the boom of guns in the First World War. In that terrible conflict, happiness by the seaside was soon forgotten, and china trinkets were too trivial and too fragile to matter anymore. But the manufacturers soon recovered. Instead of seaside souvenirs, they started to make war souvenirs. They turned out models of tanks and tents and trenches and even Tommy Atkins. If holiday town crests were out, regimental crests were in. Business boomed again as loud as the guns. Today, after over half a century, very few of these brittle little souvenirs are left. So a man's written a book about them. The book's called Take Me Back to Dear Old Blighty, and it's being launched this week at Hannington, near Portsmouth, where there's the biggest collection of crested china in the world, over 5,000 pieces. The author of the book is Robert Southall.
No sooner had the war started than the manufacturers jumped on the bandwagon and started to produce models that were based on military pieces. The first models came out in November, December of 1914, so 2 months after the war started.
Were the manufacturers not really exploiting the misery of the trenches?
Not really, no, because at the time it was great, it was good to be out there, to be fighting, it was patriotic.
When times got worse and men were gassed and blinded, was this reflected in the China?
No, and in fact one of the surprising parts from my research was that many of these models were registered in the time that the Somme Offensive was going on, and that was in the last half of 1916. Now the Somme Offensive was terrible as far as casualties were concerned, and in retrospect many historians say it was a bad move on Sir Douglas Haig's behalf, but nevertheless at the time it was the big push, and so the newspapers reported it and the manufacturers responded, and they brought out nearly 100 models, all linked directly to the Somme and the information that was reported.
And can you give an example of a piece that might be worth £100 and more?
One of the extreme rarities, one of the particularly popular lines are figures. Lots of figures of soldiers, nurses. There are some very rare models of aeroplanes, and perhaps the most particular and my favourite is a model of Tommy. Well, the model is described as being Tommy driving a steamroller over the Kaiser, and under the front wheel of the steamroller is the Kaiser, and there's just his face sticking out from the front. On the front of the steamroller are the words "To Berlin."
With changing tastes in the 1930s, China souvenirs went wholesale into dustbins, and they didn't reappear in World War II. So the last pieces were made in about 1918. They were war memorials, memorials to the dead and to an industry that was dying.
Terry Carroll reporting there, I believe, with a slip of the tongue just now. I said that Pam Ayres was going to have a one-man show. I meant a one-woman show. Of course, I'm sorry. So here is Ingrid with the all-woman weather show.
Well, it's been a rather better day today than we'd expected. There have been showers around, but a lot of people, rather like us at Southampton, got away without anything at all, and a lot of sunshine. In fact, it's been a westerly airstream across the whole country, but as you can see, another thick band of cloud lurking out in the Atlantic, which is moving in a southeasterly direction. It's been that depression up there is deflecting this one down here, so that by noon tomorrow we're going to get a situation like that. That means that Scotland, Ireland and north of England will still have quite a bit of sunshine and showers. Down here in the south, I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of rain and cloud. If you want to see what it looks like out in the Atlantic at the moment, here all these spotted clouds are the small cumulus clouds we've had around today. This is the nastiness that's coming across to us tomorrow. So, in rather more detail, tonight will be dry, lowest temperature 4 degrees centigrade, and a fairly fresh westerly wind. Tomorrow morning, cloud and rain will spread across the area from the west, so that although the easterly area will start off sunny, it'll all be pretty cloudy and wet later in the day. The wind is liable to be pretty strong from the southwest, probably about force 6 to 7. That's all. Cliff?
Thank you very much indeed, Ingrid. Well, that's it from us on Day by Day tonight. We'll be here again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So from all of us here on the programme, we hope you'll join us tomorrow night at the same time. Good night from us all. Good night.